Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, birds fly over the rainbow. Why, oh, why can't I? Where trouble melt like lemon drops, that's way above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow. Skies are blue. I don't know that song very well. You know, I actually really hate politics. Just so you know, like, I view the modern conceptualization of politics as anathema to everything my ancestors probably found beautiful. I get sick to my stomach when I think about how much time I wasted studying politics in the past, how much energy I put into caring about democracy and politics of various countries, when regional economics is what's actually turning the wheel. And whenever I talk about it on this show, it dates the show to its detriment. Every segment I do on current events. I just want to focus on the macro. That's genuinely what I've always wanted to focus on. I don't want to waste your time. You can hear an opinion here and then hear it in 1,000 other places. That's a waste of time to be tuning into my show, right? So, I mean, for instance, here's a good instance. H3H3 is responding to being painted in an objectively unflattering light by iDubbbz by trying to shut it down, his incredibly too online boxing event, and trying to trigger legal recourse through this same scheme. Harley Morenstein, the guy from Epic Mealtime, has dropped out, which would have meant a lot more in 2011. But it's still a pretty big hit. I watched Epic Mealtime as a teenager. I see the talent and the directing. I can see how that's a big character compared to some smaller channels. But Harley's also a douche who likely was recorded and compromised during Burning Man Festival that flooded, having sex with God knows who. And the fact that he's being led on a leash by some twitchy autist frogman only makes iDubbbz's points more poignant. And how did saying what I just said help anyone? It didn't. The archetypal issues are Jews are gonna Jew, and sometimes trying to own your opponent only sinks the barbs in deeper. The proper way to respond to something like that is by letting your enemy self-immolate over time. Don't martyr them. Certainly. I mean, it worked for me. I really don't want to hear about any of the people unless they're getting their asses, any of these particular people I just talked about, unless they're getting their asses kicked by Sam Hyde. Just saying. Like, really? That would be the only thing that would be interesting other than them dying. Imagine being a Zionist. Imagine kissing Saudi sheiks' rings before you have to go home to participate in your nation's pastime of grooming children into chanting death to Arabs. Imagine your enemies, your nation's warriors are fighting against are unarmed children and women in refugee tents. Imagine being such hypocrite pussies. Oh. Hey, God has wrath, and the universe abhors smugness. So, just let it cook. It sucks for those people who nightmare is being visited on. However, you can also trace a lot of the fault of that to the Ottoman Empire. The incredibly decadent and unfocused Ottoman Empire. That's the reason why the people grown through that system, and the Mamluk system too, but that was eventually taken over by the Ottomans when they became a real empire. That it's not the Sassanid Empire of old that would have protected and set up their people for success, but instead drained them to the detriment of the area, and then pilfered all the resources and wealth over to Constantinople, otherwise known as Istanbul. That's the issue. That's the problem. You know, not even the Mamluks drained them to the point, like, drained the resources to Alexandria. They didn't do that, but the Ottomans did. So ultimately, the fault is theirs because you should know, all the Muslim nations do, especially by 1948, know that you have an enemy that wants to destroy you and take your stuff. We Americans should know that. The German people should have known that before Hitler came on the stage. The French people should have known that before Jacobitism rose up and then used lies and smears to coup the government and murder the elected officials, replacing them with objectively worse individuals. Keep that in mind. Here's an insane fact. Cows only fart out a bunch of methane when they're fed soy-rich feed, which also gives them diarrhea. But if they're allowed to graze naturally, they don't. So what the Bill Gates, Eatsy Bugs, factory farm dipshits did was create a problem and then punish the world for that same problem. It's very, what's the word? Zionist. It's very Zionist to do that. The RoundUp-Ready soy only became a thing in 2014, and Obama helped to legalize it and, propagate something that I would say has been the central focal point for unraveling American health and American sanity, because your sanity is tied to your health. More than anything else that I can possibly think of was RoundUp-Ready soy. I really, really do believe that. I really believe that is the main thing. We all remember seeing the 2000s as a time of great strength, but great uncertainty. By the time 2016, 2015 rolled around, people were so divided and people were mutilating themselves and hurting other people. Schools were being shot up. People were doing things that they had never done before, and in a very, very much more negative trajectory than it was in, say, the 90s. And that isn't a nostalgia. That isn't viewing the past with rose-colored glasses. That is the direct consequence of everybody being poisoned by glyphosate through RoundUp-Ready soy. And glyphosate is really, really bad. People who spray it on their rocks or something because they can't bend over and pick the weeds like they're supposed to, but instead spray the rocks and then saturate the ground, and then it gets through the rain down into the water cycle and gets back up into the water cycle and rains back down repeatedly over and over and over again. It takes it a very long time for these complex chemicals to break down. They're not easily processed by nature, which is the best thing that breaks things down, because they destroy nature on contact. And so it is destroying everything around it. It's and our health included. That's the thing that RFK really needs to focus on more than anything else. You should know this is Waterkeeper. But he is way unfocused. I've never seen a more unfocused politician, at least when you're a negative politician, who I'd say is a bad person and a bad politician. You're focused on serving, Israel, Saudi Arabia, what have you, London, what have you. When you're a good person, you might not always be able to do a lot of stuff. Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard, but you do good things every once in a while when you can. RFK is so scattered. He is so, and it just goes to the fact that he literally did have a worm eat part of his brain. He literally has been gallivanting all over the place. He literally picks friends like Rabbi Shmuley. And those are your friends. You don't need enemies. You're completely and utterly dissociated from reality and rheumatic yourself. So it's hard for you to get to if you make decisions like that, it's hard for you to get to the focal points of rheumatism. But who actually has our back in this? The Russian people on the Shardy, on Soyjak Party. The whole reason why Soyjaks were invented was to punch us in the face, Americans, until we get it that what we're doing is bad health choices, started by eating RoundUp-Ready soy. There wasn't a Soyjak in 2013, you see. And regardless of what your opinion on it is, whether it revolves around testosterone and estrogen, which it doesn't, or what have you, regardless of your opinion, as long as you're avoiding the RoundUp-Ready soy, you're doing a lot better than somebody who isn't, you see. So the people on the Shardy have been genuinely trying to punch us in the face and course correct negative behavior. They stand against the predominantly Israeli body politic of 4chan, finding out in these leaks that 4chan, one of the most devilish, destructive, pornographic, telling people to drink bleach sort of website ever, was mostly Israelis. That's wild in my opinion, but more and more people are seeing these things, and people who were previously on the fence might have taken a firm stance against it. It's just like, eventually their time will come where it'll be like arguing pro-Israel will be like arguing pro-pedophilia. The time is coming fast. So, Roundup-Ready soybean farming has absolutely poisoned the water around the Mississippi River. Concentrations of glyphosate are the highest there in the entire world. It's also pure blue all the way up the river, as in pure Democrats. Pure blue in a red environment all up the Mississippi River. If the political parties existed to do anything but sell out, you'd have young Republicans promoting plans to clean it up. There's an idea. Get to it. This is going to sound like the most millennial thing ever, but I genuinely believe that all the metallic sounds metal music used to varying degrees of success were processed and mastered through dubstep. It just, it hit me the other day that that's probably what a lot of that was. It was the same trajectory that highly reverb synthesized, stuff like that, highly adulterated guitar music took in the late 80s and 90s. It went through to the 2000s dubstep scene. I genuinely believe that that's the case. They just isolated things and then put it into electronic music, which was good, been around since disco, before disco even. I'd say Isao Tomita is the oldest, and he did a bunch of remixes of classical works, but he also taught the guy that created the voice modulator for Hatsune Miku. Isao Tomita has some of the most... I grew up listening to Isao Tomita. I was listening to his songs like 25 years ago. Such beautiful, beautiful, beautiful music. And he made that... the things that go wah, 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 through the computer. I forgot exactly what that things are called. It has a one-syllable word as its name, and it can't come to my mind for whatever reason. He was a master on that, back when you had to like plug a bunch of stuff and work with serious knobs, not this light, bright, LARPing setup that a lot of modern DJs have where they're not actually doing anything. Hate EDM, hate the EDM scene, hate modern DJs. Oh, God, they suck. Some of our best modern DJs are the ones that started off, working in the lab making new dubstep music. But dubstep is that sort of modulation like metallic music that can be very loud and very powerful, but simultaneously comes into like a weird synchronicity that sounds really, really cool at times. Every note has its perfect vibrato point. I know I called that bravado in the past. Yes, laugh at me. Some metallic sounds are bad. Dubstep moves forward with this wisdom. So, speaking about wisdom, Andrew Tate, he was best in Romanian prison stress position. He was sharper. He was a martyr to his followers. He could milk his dying grandma for sympathy, and did. Now that's gone, and he's just another rich guy. Did you know that birds can see deeper shades of blue and can see the fullness of the pink part of ultraviolet? We can see shades of green they can't. But an oil slick on water probably looks like the warp to birds. Now, I personally believe if somebody has paranoia, then the best thing that can happen for them is getting off the internet and realizing that they don't have to watch people watching people all the time. Simple as. I think that would be good for the psyche. Really, truly. I think it's a very 100 IQ take to think, oh, my haters make me famous. Or, you think you pushing me down, but what you really doing is lifting me up, y'all. Nah, it's a waste of your time to play antisocial schoolyard games. You gotta grow up out of that. There's a criticism that lands, I want to hear it. But if you're not being productive and you're openly venting, bro, you are in public. Take it to the punching bag. You're not being a man by being a little sissy Redditor and crying all the time. Jordan Peterson said something on the Joe Rogan podcast that stood out from the sea of expected pseudo-intellectualism. Psychopaths are edge people. They'll migrate to the peripheries of whatever grants power over others, but never fully commit. And this is how the entire system of neoliberalism operates. It creates shell regions through global trade that allows psychopaths to exploit the various and vast majorities of the planet, as if they were the citizens of individual countries without the obstacles of regulation or immigration hampering them. This is also a way a neoliberal environment erodes positive forces for change in their own areas. For us Americans, it's Boy Scouts, the Catholic Church, and Christianity in general. Public school, social services, the list goes on and on and on. I think one of the reasons why I value nature is that I was in Boy Scouts. There's also a lot of science there, and the moment I started thinking of how deep and huge the steady and logical change throughout time of nature and how everything makes perfect sense in it, my head just starts swimming, but happily so. But it is overwhelming. So dumb scientists make up terms like evolution and focus on competition to come up with an easy projection of might making right. That's only a manifestation of the peripheries of society, as society being a hill by which we, in a strange little bell curve throughout time, that we built up a high morality position in through Christianity. You have the ancient times, of which there are their own dips and valleys, and then you have modern times, which is dipping back into incredible immorality as if we never left the Bronze or Iron Age. There's certain Iron Age people actively propagating that, like that maintain their Iron Age culture and name everything after Iron this and Iron that, Operation Iron Swords, the Iron Dome, etc., etc. They're actively pulling back from that position. Well, that's one of the best bell curves you can attain to, is that particular time in recent history where we built all this science, all this beautiful art, and we distinctly stamped a time in history that is belonging to the Lord. And a lot of people will say, edgelord little kid Satanists and a lot of other, kind of on the fence for that camp sort of people will say, we're not in the year of our Lord anymore. They'll also misinterpret Nietzsche and say that he just only believed that we were no longer in the year of our Lord, and not that that was a dire warning to what was to come if we were to consistently loose our morality. So many people, including Jordan Peterson, get it tremendously twisted about Nietzsche and how he was an immensely emotional and sometimes pathetic man, but he wanted what was best for humanity. And his Death of God speech was more of a, we are occluding our conceptualization of God. We are limiting vastly our ability to connect to God as we move further and further in what I consider to be the peak of Zionism around the time that Nietzsche was. Marxism is the peak of Zionism, and it is a big event that took us back way downhill. A big part of this slope is World War II, and a lot of neo-Nazi types that like to say that it's America's fault, but I would still say that America got tricked through their high morality into helping push that off. In reality, Germany should have, instead of blaming everybody all the time, like legitimately, I'm serious about this, instead of blaming everybody else all the time for their failures, they should have looked within. And I'm not joking about this. This is the one biggest thing that you can levy towards Imperial and Nazi Germany, is that they weren't looking within enough. They were constantly blaming, this, that, and the third for why they're failing. But I do not see a lot of the German people need to work better. The German people are already perfect, right? So then they can't possibly fail. And in that smugness, thinking that you're chosen by God, they failed immensely. You can kind of see this popping up again today. but with the same sort of immense horror, nightmares, and the long-term dissolution of many orders that have stood for tremendous amounts of time. Knowing what we know about the necessity of natural predators, even Darwin himself later in life would say it's all cooperation. Every nanometer of it is all cooperation. It's all perfectly fit together. And as a Boy Scout, I learned that nature is a place you can live in. You too can cooperate. And there is a tremendous wealth there. More free wealth than what you'd pay for in any Dollar General. Now, I'm not downplaying how fluid and frictionless real stores make life. Sometimes that's the problem. A lot of times it's not. I'm just saying that there are things that make no sense in society, and nature makes perfect sense without needing to destroy itself like society feels it needs to destroy nature in order to breathe life into the false idol of infinite growth. It's not made by God. Infinite growth is not made by God. Balanced growth is. People like Jordan Peterson get messianic when they talk about poverty and fishing up all the resources so that they can be sold cheaply to the people on Sentinel Island or whatever, which is just an excuse for stealing the wealth of the rich lands of this earth and making them poor while gatekeeping those people's resources away from them. They're to decide if they stay in the ground or not. See Latin America, when we constantly, every time they try to nationalize their own resources, use them for themselves, put them in the ground, sell them for their own country's profit, we have gone in 58 times and couped their governments. A couple of those were communist, but most of those were nationalist. And that's the big issue with Latin America and why I'm a huge student of Latin American politics. It's one of the things that I found is more important, far more important than basically anything our politics has to show for the last 30 years. The biggest thing our politics shows in the last 30 years, Mossad has compromat on tons of our politicians through people like Jeffrey Epstein and Little St. James Island. That's the biggest note that stands out in the last 30 years. All of our politicians are tremendously evil. Obama might not even be compromised. He's just doing it for the love of the game. He is a truly demonic individual. And we have let those people rule us for 30 years. Latin American politics, there's constantly stuff going on, constantly stuff changing. It goes one way, it goes the other, it goes the other way, another 10 years down the line. It's very active and dynamic. And what I'm studying from Latin American politics is, other than in places like El Salvador since 2022 or Argentina when Javier Milei became president, or Chile, which might just be a complete lost cause and is not really, it doesn't feel like part of Latin America. Their dialect of Spanish is hardly Spanish, and their politics is mostly like, who can be the closest to Pinochet while also carrying like iconography from Nazi Germany. That's a lot of what Chile is. They're just like full-blown, end state for Argentina. And that's an interesting dynamic there, because God only knows where that actually comes from. We actually know now that Javier Milei is related tangentially to Benjamin Netanyahu, and that's exactly why he's there and why he's doing his stuff and why he is so beloved by Israel and why he loves Israel so much. He is a literal relative, like a third cousin of Benjamin Netanyahu. Fascinating, right? So anyways, so I gotta finish up this point. People like Jordan Peterson get messianic when they talk about poverty and fishing up all the resources so that they can be sold cheaply to the people on, like Sentinel Island, which is just an excuse for stealing the wealth of the rich lands and making them poor while gatekeeping their own resources. They're to decide if they stay in the ground or not. See Latin America. They don't want your help. They're not your sales associates. So, I feel immensely more empathy for elite businessmen like Trump who espouse the infinite growth philosophy in all its gritty rudeness than a sophist acting as a mouthpiece for blitzkrieg movement while wearing the skin of a sensitive intellectual who pretends to be on the side of those being bowled over like Jordan Peterson. That's that. A lot of people are starting to notice that Zionists don't have the same morality as everybody else on the earth. And it's making them notice why things keep getting worse. There's a tiny subsection of mostly old people that believe it's young people not working hard enough. And though some young people remain ignorant to even detect the many coincidences around a certain group, a vast majority of able-bodied people are now getting it. That every conspiracy has a benefactor, and it all keeps pointing to Tel Aviv for some strange reason. Now, some people view deliberately inflicting destruction on others as their birthright and as their success. Now, here's a good point to tell your right-wing friends. If you feel... hold on one second. You see, these are bats. You see how cute these flying puppies are? These are the guys Anthony Fauci tried to pin COVID on. Now let's try to protect the bats. You know, protect the bees, to protect the bats, protect the manatees, protect the birds. That gets a lot of more support on the right than saying stuff like climate catastrophe, ecological destruction, stuff like that. Because when you use words like climate, you understand how people become... When you use words like climate in public, you understand how people can become flat earth, because it's very hard for people to conceptualize such big metrics, and to see that little things over a long period of time can build up into something big, and it, you know, it doesn't just go out into space, but it indeed bounces around inside of our atmosphere. You got to be tactful. You got to use the right words and employ guile and kind of play on people's emotions if you want to steer them in the right direction, and then afterwards let them walk on their own path. Be a good Taoist, you know, train people up, help people, make people laugh, teach people, and then allow them to walk on their own as if it was always them. You know, they were always the funny one, they were always the smart one, and then they will be. And that's how you breathe genuine good into this earth. In all seriousness, I have seen the future, and it is malignant, distracting, ugly, and wasteful. We need to focus on the quality of our work, not the quantity of our conquest. Deadass, we gotta get it together. The future is a $250,000 Harley Davidson with nowhere to drive but your own driveway because of all the potholes. Bryn Daniel update. He's off the liver-damaging antidepressants. He's on Adderall now. If he keeps the dosage low enough, he won't go into the nightmare dimension where the sleep paralysis demons live, and you know what? Good for him. He doesn't need antidepressants. It's not going to make things less sad, because things are sad. I hate to say it, but one of the reasons why a lot of intelligent kids end up being diagnosed with ADHD, other than the fact that there's a huge market for ADHD medications, is the fact that the technology and the modality of modern Americans and modern first worlders in general corresponds. It synchronizes very well. It's very benign and, in fact, helpful to have some form of stimulant. I do not personally agree with this. I'm going to have slow days, I'm going to have bad days, I'm going to have depressed days, and that's perfectly fine. I'm fine with swinging from 2 to 8 or 2 to 10. You know, I don't need to constantly be 6, 7, 8, 7, 6, 7, 8, 7, 6, 7, 8, 7. Because eventually that all becomes 4, 5, 6, 5, 4, 5, 6, 5. And then you never see 9 or 10 again. And then things become a lot worse in the long term. So, some of the wealth of Buddhist philosophy is that you do not need it. If there is a way of activating in your brain with drugs, you can do that without drugs. That's some of the grand wealth of Buddhism. All right, y'all. This is good for today. Cheers.